Well, it's a wonderful conference. And if you have started from the beginning, you would be impressed with the fact that almost every geroscientist and every person, regardless of their discipline, has told us to eat right and to exercise. And then we will be halfway there, if not more, to the healthy longevity that we all want. But a very wise woman once said to me, knowing how is the booby prize. We know how to do these things, but we don't do them. And this panel is on fostering the behaviors that we could adapt so that we would have longer, healthier years. And I'm going to not introduce every panelist because we would be here for the whole show, but I will say that we have Esther Dyson, who is our thought leader in residence. She is the one who is responsible for naming this panel, Fostering Behaviors instead of changing them. She was so terrific in the new models of healthcare. Dan Belsky is our resident geroscientist who's working on caloric restrictions. And what happens if he finds out that it works? Well, we have to do something about that, or all that research goes by the boards. Peter Anderson, we keep complaining that only the wealthy are doing the right things for their bodies. But Peter has his finger on what is motivating people of means to go ahead and do exercise right. And can we trickle some of that down? Can we trickle some of their motivations down to the rest of us? Risa Olinsky is a world-renowned fitness coach and has managed to use community relationships to get 1,000 people walking in the great state of New Jersey. Eric Kihlstrom, he actually builds communities and products that have to do with the way we in our environments interface with healthy longevity. And I saved our moderator for last, and that's Monique Sternin, because I'll tell you the truth, she's one of my idols. I fought very hard when she was in Paris to get her to be the moderator, because she has created and was the founder of a concept called positive deviance, the person who is doing something right in the world of people who are not doing it, and how to take that concept and make it part of social change. So she is our moderator. I'm going to throw this out to Monique. I know she has questions for everyone, and everybody has a few minutes to say their piece. And I'm going to watch the chat very carefully for your questions too. So Monique, please take it away. And you have to unmute yourself first. There you go.
I hope everybody can hear me. I want to say that it's the first time that I moderate a panel of experts. And as I can introduce myself as an expert at being a non-expert, I will be maybe the public in this nice conversation that we're going to have together. And I would like to start a bit the bottom-up approach, starting with the experience of behavior change at the personal level with Risa, and then we'll move to community-based type of behavior change strategies with Esther, and then move on to research and the work that Daniel is doing, with particularly looking at the disparity in longevity among minority groups, certain minority groups, and the larger so-called white population, and move then to Peter, who's been working with the industry on fitness. And then last, we'll go to England to meet who will have some ideas of looking at what has been working at the societal level. So without further ado, I let Risa start.
Mute, unmute. Unmute yourself. Okay, you are good.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Monique. This is wonderful to be here with this incredible group for the incredible program. So I've been in the health and fitness business for about 40 years. And speaking of behavioral change, and my passion in this field is having been a person who made incredibly huge changes 40 years ago in my life. So I like to start with that because I believe strongly that people at any age are capable of changing. We are changing human beings. We are like any animal. We can morph ourselves into something different if we choose. So how do we do that? how do we actually make behavioral changes? And the most important thing that I believe and find in the work that I do is that changes have to be manageable and doable. We cannot just wake up one morning and say, I'm a walker and I'm going to go out and walk a marathon, or I'm going to go run a marathon, or I'm going to go swim a mile. That's not humanly possible. So when I think about the factors that influence our changes, I think and feel about baby steps. We look at baby steps. We look at what is doable and what is going to breed and grow with success. People talk about failure and they talk about, well, if you fail, you learn from your failures. You do, this is true. But if with health and fitness, if you go out attempting to do something and you immediately fail, what is going to happen? You're going to give up. You're going to give up. So we learn from our failures, but when it comes to behavioral change and these factors, what we really, really want to do is baby steps. We want to build on self-efficacy and confidence and say, I can do this. I can take this a little bit further. If, as Adrian mentioned in the beginning, I'm part of a larger organization called FreeWalkers, freewalkers.org. And we're a volunteer organization that promotes long distance walking. When you're talking about long distance walking, we are, my husband likes to call it extreme walking because we walk 30 miles in a day at times. It sounds crazy, but we do it. Yeah, it seems really crazy, but it is doable. But if I'm training someone or working with someone, I'm going to take them and say, let's walk 1 mile. Have you ever walked a mile? Have you ever walked a half a mile? Can you walk around the block? And we're going to gradually build on that confidence that they can do, that there's an intrinsic value to making behavioral change. So that's what I do. I'm a personal trainer, I'm a health coach, and I've been doing it a very long time.
And may I say she did it for me when I was able to do 3.4 minutes on a treadmill. And I can walk and have in one day 50 miles, not 30, but 50 around the Potomac, right where we are in Harper's Ferry. So the issue here is, can we convince people to be very un-American and do things slowly and deliberately and not want to get the cigar the very first time around? And Monique, I throw it back to you for our next presenter.
Yes. Thank you, Adrienne and Risa. So Esther is going to take us to a different scale of behavior change where if you're lucky to have a coach or somebody next to you can help you, this is fine. But the role of the community is critical to help people not only start a new habit, but persist with it. We're talking about much behavior change per se, but long-term new lifelong habits. And so Esther had worked with many communities and on that particular topic of creating the social environment for people to be able to launch and try something new.
So I'll start out not with a story, but by a fact. I've been swimming every day for 50 minutes, missing maybe 1 or 2 days a year since I was 18, and I'm now 70. And I wish I could tell you how to do that, the one thing I would say is I am a swimmer. I'm not someone who decides to swim. And so every morning I don't wake up thinking I'm going to swim today. It's like there's no decision. I just figure out how. Where's the swimming pool? When's it open? How do I get there? Lots of complications when I travel. But anyway, what I'm doing now is working with 5 small communities. And the last thing they need is some nice white lady from New York walking in and telling them she has a program that's going to fix them. What we do is very, very different. And it's I mean, first of all, the community, most of them, they don't know who Wellville is. Wellville is the outfit that I founded and run. They know what's happening in the local school. They know where they try to go to get food. They know the problems with the transportation system. They have friends at church, or, you know, they know the community. They don't need to know about Wellville. What they ultimately do need is a community that makes it easier for them to be healthy. And more than that, I think behavior change follows purpose. You know, if you have no reason to change your behavior or to behave healthy. I was in Russia back in 1989, and I used to kid my friends about smoking and you know, how it would shorten their lives. And they would say, you know, Esther, life isn't that wonderful that we want to live that long. So again, some sense of purpose, some long-term goals, some sense of agency. And I would say that the biggest problem isn't, you know, it's not something specific. It's a general feeling that what I do doesn't matter. I can't change my own life. I can't change other people's lives. I don't matter. If that's sort of your general feeling, behavior change or healthy behavior isn't going to matter either. I mean, why bother? You know, it feels better to sit and watch TV or eat the Cheetos, or, you know, scroll through Facebook. So the first thing to do is honestly to give people role models, ideally people they love, who love them back, and they feel they matter. In practical terms, what do? We find the community organizations that are doing something effective, and we help them become more effective. Because whether you're an individual or a community organization, or, you know, and that could be, in the case of Muskegon, it's the YMCA, the Goodwill. In Lake County, California, it's a nonprofit called Hope Rising. If you're effective, you're willing to share. You'll talk to other people about what you're doing. You, instead of competing for grants, you'll say, well, why don't we get this grant together and then we can do something bigger, which is what the YMCA did with the Goodwill in Muskegon. And then they are the ones who inspire local people. They don't just help them, but they give them a model of, this is what could happen to you. And there's lots of, you know, you could spread news through apps and social media of how you started looking and feeling better when you ran a lot. You can give poor kids food, which is what the Y did a lot of, especially when the schools were closed. And so in a sense, what our mission is at Wellville is to help these community organizations become role models for community organizations in other communities as well. And that, you know, then that translates down to making it easy, providing exercise facilities, having swim lessons at the Boys and Girls Club, creating a neighborhood association that starts advocating for healthier food so that a grocery store says, wow, you know, we could make money selling something beyond Cheetos. We could sell fresh vegetables. And people are so driven by their friends, by their environment, by the affordances that make it easy or hard for them to live healthy. And, you know, people like us who have all these affordances don't realize how hard it is to find healthy food, to get out and exercise, to feel you have a sense of agency. Because if you go to a healthcare system and they disrespect you, and the school board meetings don't listen to you because you're one of the few Black people who showed up at the board meeting or whatever. I mean, life is really tough for a lot of people. I would recommend reading a book called Scarcity by Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. It basically explains why poor people do stupid stuff with their money and rich people do stupid stuff with their time. because in both cases it's finite. Anyway, so I see this as very much a social problem rather than an individual problem. Yes, individuals are the ones who make the change, but they do it because they're inspired by and get to believe in themselves through the people around them.
And I do want to say that there's a relationship here and throw it back to Monique. Risa's book, Why Walk, talks to people who do walk and tells other people why they do it, so that there's 40 or 50 different motivations there, because not everybody has the same motivation. But she also has Stroll and Roll, which is for kids. Now, could you just mention, Esther, because I was very impressed by it, what you're doing with the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, I think, getting them to understand their own biologies, through watches.
Yeah. So this is real life. I had this idea, and mostly we help the communities do what they want to do. It's not our ideas, and then they own it and so forth. But I did have this idea of, let's get some CGMs for some of the kids so they can understand their metabolism, and not because we want them to immediately start eating right, but because we want them to understand how the world works and to see that what they eat changes.
Makes a difference.
And so forth and so on. We applied to Abbott, who encouraged us to do so, for a grant. And we thought everything was going fine. We'd sent them the draft. They were communicating, start in September, finish in June, because that's Boys and Girls Club. And they said, oh, well, we didn't tell you before, but we look at these in October. We approved them in November. So right now we're using Oura rings, and we're going to focus more on sleep, as you can imagine. But the principal investigator teaching this course to the students she's a kind of holistic, very nutrition focused person. So, we made a commitment to these kids. We would do something for them that was special. And so we're going to continue to do that. And again, I'm more interested in them having a sense of agency than in whether it's over their blood sugar or over their hours of sleep at night.
Understood. Well, again, starting early is one of the ways that we could foster behaviors from the beginning. Monique, we throw it over to you for our next presenter.
So we are going to go to Dan, who's going to, maybe you could talk a bit about your new research on discrepancy on life longevity among different groups in the United States.
Yeah, sure. So knocking things over here in my office. I think this panel, being on the science of behavior change, the next panel is on health equity. And I'll be talking about some of my work on population disparities in processes of aging and what the consequence of that may be. But in this panel today, I think I'll get to that, but I wanted to focus first on some of the evidence that we've been developing, others are in the process of developing, for the immediate effects of the kinds of investments in healthy behaviors that some of the other panelists have talked about making in younger people. And I think the subsequent panelists will speak to challenges or opportunities for scaling in society. So, one of the real challenges we have, and for those who saw the previous panel on geroscience and FDA regulation, there was something of a debate about how do we get regulators to allow us to invest in development of therapies to change healthy lifespan. And one of the questions that came up was about the latency between the timing of interventions to improve healthy aging and then those outcomes decades later. And in that meeting, there was some discussion of the potential for what are really frontier pharmacotherapies to recover function in people who are aged and may have lost it. But the interventions that we're talking about in this panel, although walking is something that many people can do through most of their lives, are often interventions whose effects require an accumulated sort of body of experience across a lifespan to have their most profound effects. And that's why Esther is intervening with kids in some ways. But it's hard to know whether those kinds of interventions are having these real impacts on aging without following the participants in those interventions for 20, 30, 40 years. And so the work that I've done for the past decade or so has been focused around the idea of measuring changes in the biology of aging within the bodies of people who are still relatively young, and in whom these kinds of interventions may have potential to slow processes of aging and build healthy longevity across the lifespan. And some of those interventions can in fact be very much behavioral interventions. They don't require the introduction of new compounds into the body. And one of those interventions that we know a lot about in animals and we're starting to learn more about in humans is calorie restriction. Now, this is not an intervention I'm here proposing that we should all undertake tomorrow. Calorie restriction sounds absolutely miserable to me, and it's extremely challenging even for committed individuals to adhere to over the long term. Although, as I'll mention, there may be shortcuts some of us can take, like intermittent fasting, that require us to calorically restrict only sometimes in the day or sometimes in the month. But we've known really since the early 20th century that restricting the caloric intake of animals while making sure they get the essential nutrients they need to live can extend their healthy lifespan. And we know this is true for mice, it's true for flies, it's true for roundworms. It may even be true for monkeys. We know it's true for monkeys in terms of preventing disease. We'll soon learn if it actually extends healthy lifespan in those animals. But we've also begun to do these kinds of experiments in humans. And we recently posted our first paper, and I'll pass this on to Adrienne so she can share it through the archive of the meeting, documenting the effects of 2 years of calorie restriction in a randomized controlled trial of healthy, non-obese humans over the course of 2 years. So we evaluated the impact of this intervention on the bodies of these individuals using blood tests based in DNA methylation. These are marks, chemical tags on our DNA sequence that function to regulate the expression of our genes. They have many functions, among others, making our skin cells, and our heart cells, even though they have the same DNA. But they also turn genes on and off. And as we grow older, they change in ways that give rise to broad dysregulations in our biology. And it's turned out that we can use machine learning type analyses, complex statistical models of differences in these methylation marks between genomes of different people to advance our understanding of processes of aging in those individuals. So these algorithms combine information from hundreds or thousands of sites across the genome in a blood sample and make predictions about how long a person will live, or in the case of the tools that we developed, how fast their bodies are changing. And we can use these tools then to evaluate in a matter of just years whether an intervention is having the desired effect, whether it's actually slowing down aging in a person. In much the same way, a continuous glucose monitor, like what Esther was just mentioning, can tell you in real time how your body is responding to the food it's eating. Now, instead of talking about a time scale of hours, we're thinking about a time scale of months or years, and we're interested in how your cells are responding to the life that you're living. And what we found in this trial of caloric restriction was the life that these people were living, this calorically restricted life, was actually slowing down the process of aging in their cells. This was observable after just 12 months of the intervention, and this slowed rate of aging was maintained through the second year of the trial. So these are promising results. They're certainly in need of replication. And in fact, there's going to be the opportunity to look at this kind of a model, not just in caloric restriction, but in a wide range of interventions. The National Institute on Aging has recently funded a series of trials that will look at not just calorie restriction, but also intermittent fasting and different models of exercise, resistance training, cardiovascular activity, combinations of those two things, and combinations of those things with the dietary interventions to see how much control we can exert over these basic biological processes of aging through interventions on our behavior. And I think with that, I'll yield back the time to the rest of the panel to talk about how we can get people to take on those behaviors. But I'll just leave you with a complete agreement with Esther's concluding comments that although behaviors are enacted at the level of individuals, they're very powerfully determined by the circumstances that those individuals live in. And it's really a social responsibility that we all have to engineer environments that enable those healthy behaviors to build that healthy longevity for all. That's the goal of this meeting.
And back to my first sentence was knowing how is the booby prize, but we're hoping that with the help of Daniel, we'll know why. And maybe the why will move us a little bit more toward accepting some of these new behaviors or forced to some new behaviors, as Esther would say, that will be lead us to healthier longevity. And Monique, next steps, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're going to look at one possibility for having a better long-term habits with Peter, who is going to talk to us about the work being done in the world of spa.
Well, yes. In fact, actually, in the industry today, it's resorts and spas, and it has become so large that we actually refer to it now as wellness real estate. And it's interesting because in order to get a handle around that, we really should look at where spas, for lack of a better word, started out, and they were fat farms in the 1960s, and these were penitential, calorie restricted environments. So, we were doing this, Daniel, long before you guys were looking at it. The challenge is we were doing it from an aesthetic perspective with virtually no scientific support. So some things kind of come full circle. Now, sometimes they address short-term weight loss goals, as happens when you stop eating or reduce your calories. The problem was it didn't really change behavior, because as soon as the nanny cam was off, cookies didn't count and people went back to their old mode of living and eating. And I think Vivian stated it yesterday, and I'm kind of paraphrasing. She said moderation isn't really controllable, because if it were, then the subject wouldn't be in the situation that they're in currently. And so consequently, we as hoteliers and as resort operators are looking for ways to support trends in our markets. And there's there've been a lot of innovations in wellness environments along the way, but these have classically been one-offs. There's been high-end destination resorts like La Prairie in Switzerland and Canyon Ranch in the Americas and Shivasom in Thailand. And this is what Adrian was referring to, where the ultra wealthy would go and have a very curated experience that would address their well-being and their health. Now, what all of these very high-end places had initially is that they actually stepped over the quick fix that the fat farms tried to embrace, and they looked at science and scientific method. So they effectively delivered efficacy and pampering, and they did it with a smile. And that was incredibly popular. Now, what's interesting is, though, that spas seldom made money. I mean, they were kind of break even or even lost opportunities, but they were a required amenity for the industry. And I would and this is as the market started changing in the early 2000s, but I'd liken it to hotel swimming pools. An interesting fact here is that in the 70s and early 80s, the statistics run that 97% of all people that were inquiring about whether they should book a reservation at a resort asked if they had a swimming pool. But the actual utilization rate was less than 3%, which is kind of shocking when you think about it. But that wasn't so bad, because pools were a capital expense. They didn't require staff. They didn't require programs. They were there whether they were used or not. But in spas and wellness environments, not so much. And it's also interesting that lifestyle, has been on the back burner for a long time in the hospitality industry, because when you think about it, I mean, people go to resorts for a sense of relief, for a sense of the exotic, for a little bit of fantasy. And it wasn't until maybe the last 15 or 20 years that we've started seeing wellness environments take center stage. And instead of just being a loss leader amenity at a resort, they've actually started to become the driver of demand in these environments. So I would say probably about 15 years ago, we started to see the market aggressively begin to embrace healthier lifestyles, comprehensive wellness, and as Adrian had talked about, referring to that, high-end destinations were kind of a rarefied atmosphere that only those that could afford it availed themselves of it. Well, we're seeing a major shift now, and in 2018, the Intercontinental Hotel Group, these are the people that brought us Holiday Inn. They started, I should say, launched a moderately priced wellness chain, and they launched it in Manhattan. So it was a major shift. It was a major investment and a significant market. And what we are seeing here is that this process is starting to become a little bit more democratized, that this industry that was pamper and leisure and something for traditionally women of a certain age would avail themselves of. Now, all of a sudden, we have health becoming center stage in terms of where we put our lodging and our travel dollars. And to give you an idea that this product that Intercontinental Hotel Group launched, it was all of the clothes bars in your closet are also chin-up bars. All of the rooms come with yoga mats and Pilates balls. And all of the menus have like no forbidden foods. You don't get a little star or a heart behind the items that are safe to eat. In fact, the menus are not just, they're low fat, they're low sodium, they're high flavor. And it's really stating why this is becoming such a focus in our business. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we realize that not only is travel a necessary component of most modern American lives, but we also realize that if we want to maintain healthy lifestyles, we don't take a break from that because we're not in our homes. And so I think that this is a really exciting way to look at how the industry is approaching things. Now, I will say we still do have high-end resorts. These are the research and development of the social class. These are the places that cost anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a night to sleep, and then your food and your programs and your treatments are extra. Those exist and they are still growing. However, when you have the Holiday Inn, our Holiday Inn friends developing these business hotels that are focused on maintaining a healthy lifestyle, then I think it really speaks well to the fact that this is something that is being embraced, and we can find a balance between luxury and pampering and efficacy and health. I've worked at some really terrific wellness destinations. And I would say that the ones that are really, truly terrific are the ones that are based on science and not subterfuge. I think we have to come to the health and wellness by way of, we have come to it by way of revenue and market demands. And the trend is being supported by discerning customers that are seeking science-based solutions. So I think we can take this as a very positive thing, looking at trends in our industry, in this industry, in terms of healthy lifestyles.
And I'm wondering, we're breaking silos so much around here, that the idea that it is science-based, that the idea that you can take something home with you and a program that you can take home with you. I don't know why we can't do that in schools. I don't know why we can't do that at the YMCA, and we can't do that in community organizations like FreeWalkers. All of this can be cloned and learned. But I think that particular industry could support this, for all. Esther likes to look at coalitions that are unique and unusual coalitions. Well, there is a wellness industry out there that is outside of the healthcare system, as you said, Esther, that might be able to shed light for the rest of us, the Festivus for the rest of us. But Monique, I know you want to make sure that everybody, that Eric, who kind of rounds out a lot of this, has their say, and then we'll go on to a discussion.
Yes, so I guess we're going to England to welcome Eric. It's late at night over there, but somebody is riding a bicycle and all the ladies riding a bicycle behind you. I hope it's safe and that the community, the society has something to do with the fact that she can safely drive a bicycle.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with this great group. A really interesting conversation, and I'm going to build on, I think, a lot of what has been said here. I see in the audience Tina Woods. Tina and I work together with UK Parliament, and we helped to start an all-party parliamentary group for longevity. And we produced a recommendation to the government on a national strategy for health and well-being and longevity. And as a part of that, there were lots of the recommendations that we've talked about here, but I wanted to indicate in particular, one of the members was a woman named Dame Teresa Marteau, who really was resonating, I think, more on some of what Esther talked about. You know, it's that there's individual discussion, individual things, but I think what you really need to do is make these healthy lifestyles a default situation, and her evidence for that was the sugar tax. You saw it in New York, we saw it here in the UK. In particular, reformulation of sugary drinks happened before the legislation even hit the books. So in terms of creating healthy lifestyles, you have to make it easy for someone. It has to be the default situation. You know, Peter was talking about changing behaviors and you know, talking about, I think it was talking about moderation, and you know, they're not there because they moderate their intake. You know, what you need to do is make it easy for them. Esther was talking about how to make it easy for people to have food that is good for you, and that should be the default situation. And so sugar tax was one example of all of that. But I think there's a larger example that's happening at scale here in the UK. As a part of the national strategy, we talked about these behaviors. That was in response to what the UK had produced, what was called the industrial strategy, and the industrial strategy had 4 grand challenges, of which one of them was healthy aging. And the 4 pillars of the healthy aging were health and care, as one would imagine. Financial well-being. You know, you can't go on these fancy trips if you're worried about just fixing the broken window or keeping the heat on. So financial well-being is a second pillar. Legacy and purpose, in particular work, is a third pillar. But the fourth pillar is homes and community. And it was Churchill who once said that we shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us. And it, you know, that is very much the case in this fourth pillar of homes, community, and neighborhoods that make it up. And it's people that make a place, but we have to make it easy for people to do the right thing. And so there's been various efforts here in the UK to create healthy environments. There have been building standards for the longest time. There's something called Buildings for Life, and there's the happy principles, healthy aging for people and places. You know, really interesting work. But to be honest with you, a lot of builders disregard them. If it costs an extra $5, they won't do it because that's money out of their pocket. And so you have to make it compulsory in some of these areas. And so rather than do building codes, what they're talking about is doing it at a city level or a town level. So here in the UK, there's a national target to grow the number of homes, new homes, by 300,000 a year, of which 140,000 should be affordable. But we're trying to make them, rather than in brownfield sites, we're creating new areas, new towns. And how do you design those new towns so that they're healthy for you? And you know, there's examples of these in parts of the world, but again, it's people that make a place. So what you have to do is really get the people engaged in the building of that community, designing of the community, so that when they move into the community, they feel ownership of that community and do the walking. I mean, one of the things, I was involved with an area just outside of London called Ebbsfleet, and it's one of what they call the NHS Healthy New Towns. NHS is our national health service, and they designated 10 cities around the UK as healthy new towns, and they created 10 principles from this Healthy New Town program, and all of that's available. Can share that through the links and through the form here. Yes. So we'll share all of that. But these Healthy New Town principles talk about engagement in the community and getting people. You design the community, you design the homes, and then there's obvious things that you can do in the home to make them accessible for everyone and prevent falls. But you know, more importantly, how do you make it easy to get from the home to the amenities in the area? And so you know, you design the community, but getting the people engaged means that they use it. And like I said, it's people that make a place. And so that's quite important to make it all sort of happen. So I think you know, just to finish on a couple of programs that we worked on in Ebbsfleet, we had just like what you do when you move into an area, there's sort of a welcome pack that comes in. We called it the Ebbsfleet Voice, and it was around, or the Ebbsfleet Welcome, and it was a neighbor would come around and tell you where everything was, but it also was about getting you active, engaged into the community. So whether it was a walking group or they had Ebbsfleet eating, so they actually had greenery around, gardening around the town, where you could actually pick the fruit or vegetables that were in these community gardens. And so all of this was built into the environment, and it made it easy for you to just snack on these things as you were walking to the train station. So really interesting ideas to sort of make it easy. But once you had somebody engaged.
I think Eric, you may have frozen a little bit. Okay, he will come back, but what Eric is reminding me of are the blue zones. And of course, you will probably, the folks who are on this particular conference, know about blue zones, areas in the world where people do live longer and healthier. And it is easier to exercise and eat right. And I saw Esther shaking her head. You want to say a few words about that before we go back to Monique?
Yeah, just very briefly, Blue Zones is coming into Lake County, which is one of our 5 communities. And you know, some people sort of said, well, aren't they competition? But completely not. They're more like carrying on the baton, because what they do in a community needs a community spirit to welcome it.
Right.
And, you know, because again, just putting in the restaurants and putting in the facilities doesn't work if people don't have that sense of agency. Oh, this is something I could take advantage of, and so forth. They were recently acquired by Adventist Health, which is there are 2 major hospitals in Lake County. So it's going to be a blessing, and I love what they're doing.
Right, right. So let me go back to Eric. I think he's with us here because blue zones, for real blue zones like Okinawa, and I just came back from a blue zone in Greece, it's very easy to get fresh food. It's very easy to exercise, but as both Eric and Esther said, everybody's socializing throughout the age continuum, and that's what you do. And without that, forget about the good food and forget about everything. Eric, do you want to wrap up on what you were saying? You froze there.
Yeah, forgive me.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Yeah. Thank you for covering for me, Esther. So yeah, just to finish on that, we had the Ebbsfleet Welcome and the Ebbsfleet Voice, and it was getting people engaged in the community, but staying engaged and continue to stay engaged in the community so that you could do these activities of exercise by stealth. you made it fun and engaging for people to do these healthy behaviors, and they don't realize they're doing them. And
Right.
that's the best way to get involved, is to make it fun and easy and enjoyable, where you're socializing.
Well, that's the essential word, fostering. Now, I said that Monique was one of my idols, and I'm not kidding about that, because she's a co-founder of a concept of social change called Positive Deviance. It's a great book. It's on for those of you who are attendees, it's in our bookstore on Cadence. Take a look at it. But the fact is that, tell us a little bit, Monique, what is the idea of the positive deviant, and do you think it would work? It's worked in so many arenas. It's worked even with MRSA in hospitals, and it's worked in Vietnam with children who were malnourished. But you think it would work in some way to find the person who is embracing all these things and use them as the positive deviant? I don't know the answer, but you know the answer, so let's hear it.
Well, in a nutshell, positive deviance is inviting communities to look at solutions hidden in plain sight. So in our field where we're talking about, I'm just inventing here what it could look like. It would be probably at a community level. So this resonates with Esther and Eric, saying a community gets, first of all, define what the problem is. In many communities in the US, the problem is the lack of exercise. People see the problem as lack of security. In Hispanic and African American communities, where there have been nutrition studies, the survey went on, and there was high level of childhood diabetes or obesity, and the nutritionists went there and they looked and they said, well, we don't find anything different here. But when they asked the community people about, do you have other problems? The people said, well, actually, we cannot let our children play on the street, which means, of course, they stay in front of the TV and they eat and munch and get fat. So the problem statement was not lack of good nutrition or bad diet. It was the fact that the streets were not secure. Oftentimes when we define the problem, the way it's defined by the expert is not the same the way the community, that's the first point, defined it. So starting with community ownership, they would define what the problem regarding healthy lifestyle would be, and they may focus on one issue that they want to solve. The process of doing that would say that they would invite all levels, all the stakeholders involved, and that could involve Peter, with meaning the industry, of course, the administration, like Eric would say, it has to be done at the administrative level. It would, and I'll go to Risa, it would involve all the local formal and informal network, what we call official DOM, and then informal networks, and citizen, just normal citizen. And together, they would look at the problem. They would even define, using some of learning to measure the magnitude of the problem. Our children, for instance, don't walk more than 10 feet, 1 hour a day or something. This can be measured. They could create their own baseline of what is a problem. And then they would look at solutions hidden in plain sight. That brings me to somebody like Risa. In the community, when they look at the data set, and sometimes it's called bright spotting, that in looking at bright spot in worst case scenario, you find individual or groups who have actually prevented or overcome the problem. And so the community would divide then tools, observation, interview, using their phone, videos, or whatever tools, to go and find out what those people are doing. And because the process involves all the stakeholders, because the solution, which are often non-traditional, sometimes go against the status quo, would require that the leadership, the people who make the architects, the urban planners would be there, because they'd have to change the way they they thought they would be doing urban planning. I'm not making a lot of sense, but that
No, we understand very well. I just came back from Paraguay where groups like that put in security cameras and they all walk more. And it just took a security camera. But who would have thought that? A security camera related to walking. Only if you look at that process that you're talking about with all the stakeholders.
Positive deviance, it's a jargon word, and I understand you may not like it. I understand. It's actually looking at what is working in worst case scenario. Why worst case scenario? Because if it's working, it's sustainable. I'm not interested in helping people change behavior. And then, as we all said, we all have to change our behavior in some aspect, and we go back, but we want to create healthy, lifelong habits. So we want to create something that will stick, that will stay, and that is sustainable. So the way I would see us, all of us in our own field, going to a community where all of our different silo organization fit. Every one of us could have a role, if you will, with their local counterparts, would look at the problem, then discover who are the people who have successfully prevented or overcome the problem. And then that's the biggest part, is design activity where it's not knowledge-based, it's practice-based. Mm-hmm. And actually measure another engine for change. They measure the change as it happened. They constantly, with their own measuring tool, measure the progress. Because when it's a common sense thing. Right? If I want to lose weight, I start a diet and then I weigh myself. If I see that there's a correlation between my new diet and my weight loss, I will continue.
Right.
For the way I do. So one key component of the positive deviance approach is to let the groups, and there can be different level of monitoring and evaluation, but very important is that the community develop what we call cultural scoreboards. That is, in their own way, they will measure how progress is happening. In Africa, no, I shouldn't take that example. It's not a very good example. I'd like to give you an example of the way people put their progress in a visual way for the community to be able to see that what we're doing new has an impact, and that creates more motivation. I don't know if I was very clear.
You were extremely clear, and one of the things that we'll end now, because we do have a few minutes, and I'd like all of you to take this. We at the Catalyst Institute is looking at this at a national level to make a national policy on Healthspan. But I don't think that we can make a national policy on fostering better behaviors in individuals. And that is a problem because our gerontologists tell us 50% of what we want to accomplish has to do with what each individual is going to do. So we'll go around very, very quickly. I'll tell you that we've gamified this conference. And I thought, oh, nobody's going to, get answer polls so they could win a book. Guess what? They answer polls so they can win a book. And everybody does want to do a little bit better than the next guy. So I'll just say that gamification particularly for younger people, is one way of fostering new behaviors, particularly in the workplace. Yet another big inroad, another place we can get people to change healthy behaviors. But just very quickly, starting with Esther, can we make a national policy out of this, or should we stay on the local level? And I would like to go around real quick on that.
I mean, if we're going to do a national policy, it's not a quote behavior change. It's about education and childcare, and ultimately creating a social fabric and a physical infrastructure that supports people being healthy and well educated, because then they'll have the mental resilience to do all this stuff, and they'll have the not just the intelligence but the education to do so. So that's what I would argue for. But you can't bribe people. You need to give them their own inner motivations, and that's what I hope we could do.
And Peter, do you think the wellness industry is ready to share and break out of their silo?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think to piggyback on what Esther just said, we almost have to provide peer pressure and trick people into good behavior, because that's what we do in high-end resorts right now.
But it's not a trick. You need to motivate them. I mean, the best way to motivate someone is to say, I love you. I want you to do it. But be honest.
No, you're right. I was being cavalier with that
Sorry.
verb.
So with regard to the community, what is it, 1,200 people walk in New Jersey because of FreeWalkers. Isn't part of it because it's free?
Yes, it's convenient, but
Yeah.
you're not bribing them to do it, because when you stop bribing them, many of them will drop out.
And Risa, what has been the biggest success you've had? Just word of mouth? Yeah.
I'd say our biggest success is social interaction. And after the last year, after 2020, when we were all locked in, we couldn't believe when we reopened our programs, and we do about 40 walks a year on our calendar, in a calendar year, we could not believe the enthusiasm that people came out with. And in fact, we did, last February, we could not do our 50-mile Kennedy walk, which is a reenactment of what Robert F. Kennedy did in 1963 on the O&R Canal. We have been doing that for about 7 or 8 years. And one year we actually had some of the Kennedys with us. But we couldn't do that because of COVID. So we instead did a virtual walk. And I thought, when I proposed this, I thought we were going to get, 25, 30 people. And they paid a small fee because they got a gift, a pretty red hat, and I'm wearing our logo. We sent them a gift if they registered, but the motivation was staying in touch virtually with other people that were doing this around the world. Much to my surprise, when I thought we'd have 25 walkers, we had 95 people register. Adrian was one from out in the West, and several other people. We literally had 95 people, it was $20 just to register, and the walks, and just walk and give us your feedback. Tell us how many miles you covered. And we did it for a 10-day period. It was a huge success. We're going to do it again. Now, physically, we weren't all together, but emotionally and spiritually and mentally, these folks were together. It was just phenomenal. So I'd say, yeah.
In the interest of time, I want to bring that out to Eric, though. Eric, in your communities, what about this business of using the internet to influence and also to connect? Is that part of anything you're doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, connected homes is an obvious one. There's connected between the homes, but there's a lot of work being done just around the ambient assisted living, making it zero touch so that your home sort of adapts. Particularly just managing the heat and air conditioning in your home. But
for environmental health, yeah.
Yeah, but I did want to build on one thing that Risa just mentioned, if I may, which isn't quite your question, but the longest study, longitudinal study is the Harvard Grant study into longevity. And one of the major takeaways was that the quality of your social relationships is the #1 indicator of your health span. And so walk with friends is my trick. That's my recommendation. Just keep walking with friends, whether it's FreeWalkers or other. It's exercise by stealth. And by the way, the walking isn't as good as the talking. The talking is where you really extend your health lifespan.
So true. And Daniel, we're going to see you on the other side for a little bit more, because I want to give Monique the last word on this. Go ahead, Monique.
Well, it was very exciting because it's a new field for me. I'm not, as I said, an expert, but a lot of what you all said resonate with me. The fact that we have to, connectedness is the most important ingredient in helping people, fostering people's behavior change. And bringing people across silos to think together is very important. So the idea that came from England of a national, but at a national level, to have a national strategy where many people come together to discuss together. I would like to add that we are looking here, we're all white, we're all middle class something. I'd like to mention that sometimes we have to think of the people who are not in the conversation. That should be. Because this week I was listening to NPR, and locally in Dorchester, which is where the Kennedy family lived, a group of Black male, African-American male, started a group to run, and there are just 17 of them so far. It's part of a national group of Black men who run, and if you can look at NPR, their reaction to be together, because what I want to say last is that context matter. We don't know what it is like to live as a young African-American man in an American city. And one mention is that my everyday that happens from just living in my neighborhood. The fact that I joined those people and started to run with them, and they don't run in a beautiful area, they run through their neighborhood.
They run where they are. They run where they are. Well, we are going to be talking about that. We're taking a little bit of a break now. I hope you all stay on, because we're going to be talking about just that, and that is equity in all these things that we're talking about. So I think we're going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to leave myself on for a moment, and we're going to leave Risa on for a moment, because she is going to lead into some beautiful music and an introduction from Harper's Ferry by giving us an example of what we could do on our own chair. I'm sitting in the chair. I'm going to do that with you as we exercise during these 4 days of this conference, because I'm 10 years older than I was on Monday. I haven't moved for about 3 days. What should I do? I'm going to take my jacket off.
Okay. Okay, I'm unmuted, everyone.
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Well, the first thing that I always like to say when you're going to do any kind of exercise is that the breathing is very, very important. It's very important because whether you're lifting weights, whether you're walking, running, whatever you're doing, your breath is your life. And I'm not sure what the right term, I think it's well, I don't remember what the exact right term is in yoga, but breath is life. So let's start with a deep breath in, and the arms go all the way up. Inhale, and open your arms, and exhale. And again, we're going to take a nice deep breath. Inhale, stretch up, and exhale. Now to loosen up the shoulders and the neck, we're just going to roll the arms around, the shoulders around, easy. Shoulder rolls going back, and then reverse. Shoulder rolls going forward. Okay? And again, deep breath in and all the way up. And bring your arms down in front. And then take one arm up and feel like your fingers are reaching up to the ceiling and your fingertips on your other arm are reaching down. And just take a gentle bend to the side. Inhale. And exhale the arm down. And reach the other arm up as you inhale. And exhale. And relax that arm down. Sit on the edge of your chair, on the very edge, but be careful. You can't see my feet, but my knees are bent. Let's see, can you see my legs? No, you can't. There you go, see my legs. Knees are bent, feet are flat on the floor. Let's pop this back up. And now what we're going to do is take one leg and just gently hug that leg into your chest. Take a deep breath. Prana, that's the word I was thinking of. Prana, the prana breath, and lower it down. Take a deep breath, inhale, and lower your leg down, okay? Now, again, take one leg, stretch it out in front of you. This is what you have to deal with the Zoom here. Stretch one leg out in front of you. Flex that toe, okay? Flex that toe, sit up nice and tall, and raise that leg slightly up. And you can see my toes here. Raise that leg slightly up and then lower it down and bend the knee again. Stretch your other leg out and raise the leg up so you can see toes and lower it down. Good. I'm going to roll forward again. Okay. Now, let's go back to the upper body. Roll the shoulders a little bit. Just kind of loosen them up. Jiggle, 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 jiggle.
And
jiggle.
Risa, I'm feeling great already, but we do have to go
One
on
at
to
a
our
time.
next part of our
Great.
break.
Mhm.
What I would love you to do, and everybody else, please, is please stay on after the next session.